All right, everybody, it's day 4, and I don't know how many of you are watching this. I know you've got other academic subjects to focus on, but we're going to do a little bit of the fighting in North Africa, probably get close to moving on to Sicily, so this could be a very short one today. I'm also going to upload a test to Google Classroom, so when you guys see this, please share the word. I'm going to have a test up there during the office hours starting the 30th, which are 11 to 1. Email me and I'll send out the Google Classroom code so we can get some grades in during this interesting time that we are living in. So where we stopped yesterday was that over in November in Western Africa, in Morocco, in Algeria, the coalition forces, the Allied forces, the British and the Americans have landed. Some interesting machinations go on over there. Admiral Darlan, who was the French admiral who agreed with the Vichy French's surrender and working with the Germans, will arrive in Morocco on November the 7th. He was going there to visit his son who was sick, and he gets caught up in Operation Torch. While the British and the Americans are landing, he will switch sides, and we're hoping to keep him as the governor until he is later assassinated. But by then, it really doesn't matter because we've got a foothold in North Africa stretching Adolf Hitler's supply line from Stalingrad, Moscow, and Leningrad all the way to North Africa. And so before this, in Eastern Africa, heading for the Suez Canal, is famous German General Erwin Rommel, leading his famous Africa Corps. The bulk of it is the German army, but there's mixed in also a lot of Italians. And the Italian soldiers are going to fight hard, but they are poorly led by Italian generals who do not want to admit their own failures to Benito Mussolini, who they called the Capo Supremo. And so the farther Rommel goes in the desert, it begins to take a toll on his equipment. The heat of the desert, the sand grinding in the gears and the ball bearings, and the constant replenishment needed of gasoline and oil begins to take its toll. But he wins stunning victories, defeating a series of British generals. Back in the Italian-German front, Mussolini keeps telling Hitler that he is supplying Rommel with all the gasoline and ammunition that he needs. Mussolini is afraid to admit his failures. And while many boats are going to start streaming out of Italian ports and planes flying from Italy to North Africa, now that the Allies are there, the Royal Navy is beginning to take its toll. So Rommel has got to get to the Suez Canal to cut off a supply line for the Allies. And in June of 1942, well before Torch, the British are fighting Rommel. And there is an attack by a guy, I never enunciate his name right, Auchinleck. And Auchinleck attacks and he stops Rommel, but he loses so much equipment that he's got to be pulled. So a guy named Sir Harold Alexander it's way too early in the morning here. Sir Harold Alexander is put in place by Churchill, and he is going to select General William Gott, who's going to be on his way to North Africa when his plane crashes on August 7th. And so we've gone through a German or British general. We had to fire, Auchinleck. Now Gott has crashed. So we're on our fourth choice, which is going to be a guy named Lieutenant General Bernard Law Montgomery, who's going to be a legitimate British hero here early on in the war. And he is going to fight what's called the First Battle of El Alamein in August 30th through the 31st at a place called Halfa. You don't really need to know this, but what he does is he looks at Rommel's attack plan. Rommel uses the same sort of attack pattern over and over and over again because it works. So Montgomery is going to lure him into a trap, and he's going to bury his tanks and artillery into old, like British Wellington squares, and seed the sand dunes with landmines, and invite Rommel to attack to the south while his main support is high up on this ridge. And it works brilliantly. The British 7th Armored trash and stun Rommel for the very first time, costing him many battle wagons, many tanks, and pieces of equipment. So he's stalemated. And then Rommel gets sick. He's jaundiced, he's got sores from living in the desert, and he decides that he is going to go back to Germany to talk to the Fuhrer, to tell him of the problems that he's having. These other guys are lying to him, and he needs support. Well, Hitler doesn't want to hear any of this, and he orders Rommel to go to the hospital and get some bed rest. And so, it's October, between October the 23rd and November the 4th, Bernard Law Montgomery is going to fight the Second Battle of El Alamein. And when he does, it's going to be the very first aggressive action by the British here. And when it's done, the Afrika Corps, who has become legendary in the desert, suffers its first stunning defeat. Now, Montgomery wins this, and a lot of people say, well, the Germans were running out of gas, they were low on ammunition, their vehicles were breaking down, and that may all be true, but it doesn't matter. Montgomery wins this victory for the Allies, and this is decisive, right? Because now it opens for destruction the forces of the German and Italian armies throughout North Africa. Torch is landing in the east while Montgomery wins in the west. And now they can totally compress. They can come from two sides and squeeze and trap this veteran German army down in North Africa. Things are so bad, Rommel will leave the hospital to come down and take charge. And while the Nazi armies, the Wehrmacht, whoever you want to call it, had made great gains across North Africa, they've now got to retreat. They're trying to hold the British off, who are hot on their heels. And so this is big. All right. This victory by Montgomery allows the church bells to ring in victory in England for the first time since the Battle of Britain. It's time to celebrate. The war-weary British needed something to celebrate. And so Rommel, during this retreat, is going to have to sacrifice German units to strengthen his weaker Italian allies. So while Montgomery is going to grow in strength, Rommel is going to weaken in strength, especially when he was on sick leave. And so here is the famous Desert Fox, Erwin Rommel, one of the the only German general I know of not first to join the Nazi Party. And then you've got Bernard Law Montgomery, who is about to become a hero here from his victory at Second El Alamein. Now, as Montgomery begins to chase Rommel through the desert, again, it's supply problems. Benito Mussolini, it's all about honor and prestige. He doesn't want to admit that his generals haven't been going to the front. They've been poorly leading their men, and the tons and tons of gasoline he says are showing up aren't getting there. So he keeps telling Hitler that they are. Rommel, going back and forth on various calls of sick leave, is beginning to irritate Hitler because he keeps crying that he needs more supplies. And Hitler's like, look at all you've been given. You've gotten all of this. And Rommel is actually saying no, I really don't. That's what he says he's sending, but I am not getting it. And while this happens, Rommel learns that as he's retreating, he's got to go and fight off holding actions at places like, Benghazi and he's taking this coast road. He's trying to get to Tunisia so he can offer himself an escape route and get to Sicily and Italy if he needs to. And he learns that the American armies are being sent from Morocco, coming over to try and box him in. For the first time, he's going to be up against these Americans. And the problem is, the American tanks have this crappy little, 37 millimeter solid projectile. And when these tanks go into combat, guys are firing, and they're going, my God, you missed. You never missed. No, I hit him directly. And the tank commanders can see their shells hitting the German tanks and bouncing off. American equipment is woefully unprepared for what the Germans have. Even though the German stuff is older, it's running out of gas, it's breaking down, it's much better than almost the World War I garbage the Americans are using. And so there's the famous Battle of Kassarine Pass. And what we have here is the American army is coming across Algeria, trying to get to the port of Tunis, ancient Carthage, to close off the German escape route. Here's El Alamein, way over here in Egypt. We're fighting a delay action in Benghazi, fighting a delay action in Tripoli and Libya, trying to get here to Sicily and Italy. And right here, through the mountains between Algeria and Tunisia, is the Kassarine Pass. And Rommel uses his old tactics. The Americans should have been up on top and on either side of this ridge. Instead, they're down in the mountain pass, and using the age-old tactic, knowing the horns of the bull, where you send in a few numbers of guys to be attacked while you are swooped around and encircled from a much larger force than behind. The Battle of Kassarine Pass is terrible. Fighting goes on in there. Thousands of Americans are killed. It's hand to hand. It's bayonet to bayonet, and it's an embarrassing loss. The Americans' first time up against Rommel. They find out what fighting a determined, truly ready for you enemy is. And so the gateway is going to be open, possibly to escape for the Germans from North Africa. And so Rommel's going to build a defensive line, known as the Meredith Line, to hold off the British. He's not so much worried about the Americans anymore, so his troops can evacuate Italy. He has been asking for the ability to retreat, and Hitler keeps telling him, no, you must stay there. And he's like, we must save everything we have before it gets destroyed. But Rommel, despite his pleas, is once again told no by Adolf Hitler. And then this thing happens where Dwight Eisenhower has to go forward. And he wants to see what happened to these American soldiers. He's got to answer for it to the president and to the American people. And commanding them was one of his very good friends, maybe his best friend in the world, General Lloyd Friedenthal. And as Eisenhower gets danger close to the front lines, he doesn't see any anti-tank mines. He doesn't see any barbed wire. He doesn't see any large machine guns. He doesn't see any anti-tank guns. And he starts asking the defeated guys, where's your stuff? Where are all the engineers? Where are the sappers? Where are the defenses? And they go, we don't know. We were out here. We got massacred and we haven't seen him. So Eisenhower starts looking for his commander's headquarters, and he finds them 60 miles away. And he goes through this serpentine switchback road that's heavily sandbagged. There's concrete barriers, there's machine guns, there's anti-tank mines, there's barbed wire. And he gets to the top and he sees all of these guys, carving out a tunnel into a mountain. And Eisenhower gets out and he's furious. All the engineers were building headquarters when their guys were needed up front. And as Eisenhower gets out of his Jeep, his buddy Friedenthal comes out, hey, Ike, do you want to stay for lunch? And Eisenhower is like, what is all of this? Oh, well, the guys are about done building my headquarters. Then we can send, the stuff to the front. And Eisenhower's like, the American people have given us this disposal of equipment to use at the front. Guys were massacred out there. And he's like, well, man, calm down. It's war, buddy. Once I get this set up, we'll go and we'll take care of it. It's only the opening round of the fight. And Eisenhower's like, what is wrong with you? Thousands of Americans are killed and captured. I've got to answer for it. And you're sitting back here building a palace in a mountain. That's it. You're fired. Friedenthal's like, you can't fire me. We're buddies. And Eisenhower's like, I can and I am. I'm not going to fire you from the army, but we are going to pad your little checklist here, your little resume, and it's going to say, since you've experienced real combat, you're going to go back and lead American training to prepare for this. But that'll be the end of my career. It'll keep you in the army until retirement, Lloyd, but you're done. And sitting with Eisenhower is another solid, reliable general who will become known as the GI General Omar Bradley. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? And sitting in Morocco is the flamboyant, colorful, love him or hate him George Patton. And Patton had been saying, why are you making me governor of Morocco? I don't need this. Let me get out there and fight the Germans. Come on. He's like, we need to destroy them before they escape. These German soldiers are good. Rommel is good. All right, we need to stop them before they escape, and we need to do that now. And the problem once Eisenhower inserts Patton to take charge of the Third Army, and the very first thing Patton does is when he comes in, he starts imposing stiff fines. Get your shirt on, button your collar. The officer's mess is going to open at 6. It'll close at 6:15. He's like, the guys have no discipline. They have no training. They don't look like an army. So how are they supposed to fight? So he comes in and scares the crap out of everybody. But this means that we're going to have two large egotistical, two large colorful generals, two roosters in the henhouse. Patton and Montgomery are going to begin this insatiable competition to see who is better, to who gets most of the headlines, sometimes at a cost of their own men. But Patton and Montgomery's forces are going to pound and totally squeeze what was left of the Africa Corps in early March and April of 1943. And by the time they're done, they're going to chop up Rommel's forces. He is going to be allowed to escape. They don't get there soon enough, and the German army will retreat to the island of Sicily, which will be tomorrow's lecture. That'll be day 5. Today is 3/19, 3/20, whatever it is. It's Thursday, 2 days after St. Patrick's Day, the first week that we've been out of school. Again, I was kicked out of the building yesterday, all teachers by 2 o'clock, so this is what we are going to do for a while. So one last thing to add, in 1943, in early January, President Roosevelt is going to, in secret, travel to Casablanca, where he is going to meet British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who kind of shows up in a clunky old stinky plane, not a lot of security. Rumor has it Churchill even went swimming in the Mediterranean, and they hold a conference, and they begin to plan the initial seeds of what will eventually become known as the D-Day invasion. Joseph Stalin does not arrive because, number one, he's afraid of flying, and he was obsessive about his security. He didn't think he could be protected, so he stays home. So, first part of the phase of defeating the German army, the Germans and Italians are shoved out of North Africa. They're on the island of Sicily, where we will head tomorrow for the big show. All right, stay safe, guys. We'll talk to you soon.